policy tour. Joining us to discuss is Daniel Lacalle, chief economist at Tres's Hedge Fund, international financial analyst, and author of the book Freedom or Equality. Daniel, always good to see you. Can I just ask you, how do you feel about the size of the expected cut at 0.25%?
Well, I think it's logical. It's what everybody expected. The Fed continues to be very aggressive in its messages about inflation when inflation is nowhere to be found. And obviously that is hurting Americans and it's hurting families and small and medium enterprises in particular. But a 25 basis points cut is at least within expectations and part of a broader cut that is likely to happen in the next 3 meetings.
But let me ask you this. We got the inflation numbers a couple days ago, about a week. So with inflation still above target, do you think easing monetary policy makes sense?
Well, we have to remember what has caused inflation in the United States. No, you have to remember that usually people think that increasing rates is a way of controlling inflation because that would reduce money supply. However, what happened between 2022 and 2024 is that the Fed increased rates, but at the same time, the government continued to overspend. Deficit spending went through the roof and inflationary pressures were the same. So what happened was that elevated rates hurt families and small and medium enterprises while the government continued to spend like there was no tomorrow. So what is happening right now is that the inflationary pressures are coming down precisely because the government is reducing expenditure, reducing the amount of money created. However, you need to cut rates because small and medium enterprises and families have been really affected, first by the Fed's wrong policies regarding inflation in between 21 and 23 and with the rate hikes of 24 and 23. Those elements are negative for small and medium enterprises. And basically what we need to understand is that those do not cause inflation. What causes inflation is the increase in government spending.
All right, I also wanted to talk to you about Trump's Asia trip. What would you say is the overarching objective of his 6-day visit on the trade front?
I think there are 3 main objectives. Objective number 1 is to strengthen the relationship between the United States and Japan. Japan has been selling treasuries in the past years, trying to defend the yen, unsuccessfully, to be honest. And with the new prime minister sharing a lot of economic policies and a lot of viewpoints with the Trump administration, there would be an opportunity to strengthen the ties with Japan and get Japan to go back to purchasing treasuries. No, the second one is aiming at China, is looking at the importance of building very, very strong ties with technology giants like to China and beat them in terms of trade, in terms of rare earths, in terms of all of those elements that seem to be creating tensions between the United States and China. So it's an important element. Japan is a big rare earth provider. And the third one is financial. No, both the United States and Japan are part of the SWIFT environment, and Japan needs the United States' strength in the financial market to reduce the pressures on long-term bond yields. So all those elements, treasuries, trade, and an alliance in everything that has to do with rare earths are elements that are significant added to the financial part.
So Daniel, as you know, all eyes are on China because a deal with China is at the center of this tour, right? What are the stakes here? What would happen if the U.S. cannot reach a deal on tariffs and rare earths?
Well, I think that if they don't reach a deal, it's going to certainly reduce the optimism from markets regarding the economy in 2026, because it will be negative for China and it will be negative for the United States technology advancement. But I think that the situation right now is a situation in which the United States has the upper hand precisely because of the deal reached with Japan right now. If you remember, uh, reaching an agreement with the UK in terms of trade was absolutely critical to reach an agreement with the European Union that seemed to drag its feet. In this case, I think it's also very similar. Reach an agreement with Japan that immediately reduces the dependence on rare earths from China, reduces the dependence of some of critical elements from China, and forces the Chinese negotiators to reach a more positive deal that would ultimately be essential for both economies. China cannot uh, go ahead without a trade deal. We have already seen how it is impossible for China to offset the US market with other markets. And at the same time, the United States thinks quite, and quite rightly so, that there is an opportunity to reestablish trade relationships with China from a more leveling playing field environment.
Okay, so in a sense, in a nutshell here, Daniel, are you saying that more successful negotiations with Japan, stronger cooperation will put the U.S. in a stronger position in negotiations with the upcoming meeting with China?
I think so. I think that the agreement with the Japanese Prime Minister is absolutely critical to show to China that it's not just something that the Chinese government can delay endlessly. That it creates a significant change in the balance of power in terms of the trade negotiations.
So would China be losing this card, so to speak, if the U.S. can diversify its supply chains when it comes to rare earth minerals?
So that is for sure. That is absolutely clear. If China plays too aggressively the limitations on rare earths as a key element of its trade negotiations, the United States can immediately go to other suppliers and sort the situation very, very quickly. To be fairly honest, actually, in a very substantial way compared to what was perceived maybe 3 years ago. Big development there.
Okay, so before going to Japan, Trump visited other Southeast Asian countries. And one of the things that Trump talked about was trade imbalances with those countries. Can you speak to what is driving the Trump administration's focus on these trade imbalances with nations like Vietnam and Malaysia?
For example, Vietnam is well known for utilizing its borders for origin washing. No? There are a number of non-tariff barriers that are limitations for US companies, particularly in automotive parts, also in soybeans, in agricultural products, in farming products, in chemicals. So it's not tariffs. A lot of the headlines that I read these days are about, there's no tariff impact. No, it's not about tariffs. It's about those significant regulatory, administrative, and taxation burdens that limit the trade with the United States, while those governments at the same time are giving a preferential treatment to China in some cases, like is the case of Vietnam, and therefore creating that imbalance that the Trump administration is saying. Basically, what is the imbalance? The imbalance is that the United States companies have significantly higher burdens to export to those nations, while those nations favor other political allies in a more aggressive way, and therefore they're creating this very, very significant difference in, as I said before, in automotive parts, in agricultural, and also in farming products and chemicals. Chemicals, very important.
So, Daniel, just one last question here. Vietnam and Malaysia pledged to buy more U.S. goods to narrow their surpluses. Can I ask you, do these purchase commitments historically work in reducing trade imbalances?
Very rarely, but I don't think that the Trump administration is looking to eliminate the trade deficit. What is looking is to eliminate or at least significantly reduce the unfair treatment of U.S. companies, which is different. We all agree that if there's a trade deficit based on the open and free cooperation between free companies, that is okay. And that benefits both nations. That benefits consumers and benefits the nations. The problem is when the trade deficit has absolutely nothing to do with the Ricardian view of trade and has everything to do with regulatory, administrative, taxation, and non-tariff barriers that shift the trading patterns to support China and hurt the U.S. That is what the U.S. administration is trying to at least reach an equilibrium in terms of not the amount of trade, but the fairness of that trade.
Well, all right, Daniel, really appreciate you giving us your time today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Don. Always a pleasure.
Beijing is trying to pitch itself as an alternative to what it calls U.S. protectionism. The regime signaled an expanded free trade pact with the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. That's ahead of a planned meeting between President Trump and Chinese regime leader Xi Jinping this week. Here's more.
China signed an upgraded free trade deal with the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, on Tuesday. The 11-member bloc is China's biggest trading partner, with bilateral trade totaling $771 billion last year. Beijing is seeking to strengthen its ties with ASEAN to counter hefty import tariffs imposed by President Donald Trump. Beijing's Commerce Ministry said the upgraded agreement includes sections on digital, the green economy, and other new industries. It was signed at the Summit of ASEAN Leaders, which Trump also attended on Sunday at the start of a trip through Asia. Talks on the upgraded deal began in November 2022 and ended in May this year, just after Trump's tariff offensive kicked off. Beijing has been seeking to position itself as a more open economy, even as it courts criticism for expanding export restrictions on rare earths and other critical minerals. The US and China extended a trade truce this weekend in Kuala Lumpur. Negotiators hashed out an agreement for Trump and Xi Jinping to decide on later this week when they meet in Seoul.
Taiwan says its relationship with the United States is stable and that there is close cooperation between the two sides. The country's foreign minister made the remarks today ahead of President Trump's upcoming meeting